Ladies and gentlemen, we have a champion amongst us.
Look at that.
I never thought I'd even play for the Brumbies, let alone the Wallabies, let alone playing a Lions series. So it was a real pinch me moment, and only something so 12 years later, I'm really sort of, wow.
Australians normally are quite confident when it comes to sport.
Who, me? Confident?
You've earned it, in fairness, you've earned it.
They were tossing rugby balls through a tuk-tuk to try and get through the other side.
Rugby is the one sport that has failed to innovate over the years.
Yeah.
I just don't know if we have the big enough names yet in rugby.
But that's a marketing problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what R360 could bring. But I don't know if we're there yet to have to start to kick off a completely new league.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of This Sporting Planet, where we bring you the world's view of sport. We're a fast-growing community that's connecting global sports fans to debate and enjoying major international sports. So a huge thank you for all of your comments to date. We absolutely love to hear all of the different perspectives, and we love the fact that you write them in your first language, whether it's Spanish, Russian, French, Mandarin, and many other languages have been shared. Even Ocker Australian. Now, this show brings together international voices who are passionate about sport and live and work in the regions where major events are taking place. In this episode, we're going to be discussing rugby and bringing you views from Australia, India, and Europe. We're previewing the latest British and Irish Lions tour, which is heading in my direction down under, and it's going to be a huge part of winter until August the 2nd. And it's the first time the team have travelled here in 12 years. So we'll be getting the thoughts of the Wallaby great Ben Alexander as well this episode.
9 matches across 5 weeks at some of Australia's most iconic venues, such as the Melbourne Cricket Ground and the Adelaide Oval. The Lions go into this Test Year series as favourites, and with 3 of the 4 home nations who make up the Lions, namely Ireland, England and Scotland, ranked above Australia in the World Rugby rankings, could we see a whitewash?
Oh, that is a big call. But here in India, guys, rugby might be a fledgling sport, but it's got some Bollywood backing here as well with the Rugby Premier League, and therefore interest levels have started to rise, and that's always a good thing when it comes to more sport in India. So we'll be tuning into the series for sure, and the rugby fans here know that writing off Australia, as we know with several other sports, would always be a mistake, because the Wallabies are showing clear signs of improvement under their head coach Joe Schmidt as well. Plus, this is a big one. It's been labelled delusional, it's been labelled flawed, but we could be seeing a new breakaway rugby league called R360. And that could be one of two things. It could be what the sport absolutely needs, or it could be absolute disaster. We're going to discuss all of that and a whole lot more on this episode of This Sporting Planet.
Kate Allman here alongside Suhail, Chandhok and Natalie Sawyer, talking all things rugby this episode, including that breakaway rugby league that has ruffled a lot of feathers. But first, you may have noticed Suhail has a bit of a croaky voice this episode because, ladies and gentlemen, we have a champion amongst us. Suhail, you are the latest UTT champion. Tell me what that is, and can we have a look at the trophy?
Wow, look at
being
that.
CEO, guys.
Look at
That's
that thing.
amazing.
How's that going to fit in your trophy cabinet?
I did have a good nap with this last night, Kate. I will say.
And how is the voice? Last night, did you get to bed early this morning? What are we talking?
Let's just say I didn't really get to bed much, and we'll leave it there. I flew in on a 4 a.m. flight, and I did not get a wink of sleep. But hey, it's totally worth it. Hence the croaky voice. But thank you guys. Look, it's been awesome. I mean, the trophy's insane. I didn't think it would actually be as nice as it is. Yeah, it's a tough league. You've got players from around the world, some of the top table tennis stars. We had players from Romania, from France, from across India, of course, players from around the world, from the likes of, some of the top Chinese players to guys from Europe, all across India as well. So to come away from an 8-team league, to come away with a title, I think it's one that our franchises wanted for the last 10 years. So, yeah, I think it's a big one.
So Ultimate Table Tennis is the league, and this is the most prestigious tournament in table tennis. Is that correct to say?
Yeah, it's up there. I would say it's up there with some of the biggest leagues in the world. You've got a French league, you've got a couple of other European leagues, and this one is now a huge attraction to players that come in. I mean, the captain of our side is Bernadette Zoc, who's a Romanian world number 12. She's all of 5'6", but absolutely unbelievable on the table, and she just has this drive about her. And she said, we're going to get this win under our belt. We're going to deliver it. Don't worry about it. I got this covered. Now, well, where's the confidence like that? I mean, where do
That's
I find that?
legendary. That's amazing. Well, 5'6" probably an advantage. You're a little bit closer to the action down there. So yeah, but Suhail, you've had a fantastic week and obviously a few red lemonades last night. Natalie's been on the red lemonades for a different reason and possibly a little bit sadder. Natalie, commiserations. Talk us through how you're feeling after the news at Brentford.
Yes, Thomas Frank, our beloved head coach, after nearly 7 years, has departed. He's moved to North London, to Tottenham, to take over from Ange Postecoglou. Devastated is the
R.I.P.
word.
Yeah.
It is, though. It's devastating. It's a weird one. Most managers don't last 7 years, as I mentioned, like Thomas Frank has had really nearly at Brentford. I think the lifespan nowadays is about 2 years for a manager. So for us to have had, double that, if not more, obviously, is pretty impressive. It's just quite weird because you just think, well, we're synonymous. Brentford and Thomas Frank, we go together. That's us. So it's going to take some time getting used to not having him in the dugout. But the one thing I'll say is if a manager is walking out through the front door rather than out the back door being sacked, it means he's done a good job. He's improved us. He's obviously picked up the interest from a club like Tottenham. So it means we've been doing good things. And hopefully it means that whoever comes in to replace him is only just going to continue to build on what he's left behind. But yeah, I'm still very upset about it because I just love Thomas Frank. So I just hope Tottenham look after him. That's all I keep saying.
So, Natalie, commiserations to you. I know a lot of people were watching from over here, and I myself, I read your opinion article and loved it. You touched a few hearts, but particularly for Australians who are also saddened by the news that your coach is taking the shoes and going to fill whether big or small shoes, depends on where you sit, the shoes of Ange Postecoglou. Now, from down under, we believe he had a huge impact, and I cannot actually believe that Tottenham are willing to part ways with the man that has brought a trophy to their franchise for the first time in 17 years. Sure, his results in the Premier League were not fantastic, but to be honest, who really cares what you do in the Premier League? If you're bringing trophies home from Europe for the first time in 17 years, does anyone really give a rat's ass what happens in the Premier League? I say, if you're not going to win it, what's the point? Go over to Europe and focus on the trophies. That's exactly what he did. He always wins in his second year. He came through with that. And you know what's even better than his second year? His third year, right? So they are missing out on a huge opportunity. I just think it's a massive loss. We're all pretty pissed off down under, to be honest, that our guy didn't get a better shot at things. So I'm wondering what it feels like over there, the Premier League and Europe. You guys judge everyone very harshly. Nat, what are you feeling?
Do you know what? Obviously, because of the Thomas Frank now moving there, Ange Postecoglou's sacking meant there was a hole to be filled. So obviously I'm devastated, like I mentioned already, because it meant that Frank's got the role. I totally get your point. If you win a trophy, surely that means you've earned the stripes to continue and to build. And it feels as though with Tottenham, it's more about the journey than the destination. And clearly the journey hasn't been good enough, is what Daniel Levy and the board will have decided there. Because when you consider where they finished, it was a woeful Premier League season. There's no doubt about it. They finished, 13 points off the bottom three, the one place above the relegation zone as well. You don't want to look at that table if you're a Tottenham fan. I get that. It's been really mixed over here in England in particular, because there are a lot of Tottenham fans that felt Ange deserved another opportunity to go again. But there will be Spurs fans that also will have thought, that Europa League final was not great, for example. So Manchester United, they were pretty bad. If Tottenham had come up against a better opposition, then they may well have lost that more comfortably for whoever might have won that one.
I don't buy into that. It's the best team on the day. It doesn't matter. And this is the thing with Australian sports, in AFL, NRL, even in our rugby, we go to a semi-final, a final, and a championship. We don't have leagues. I mean, football does, but that's sort of an outlier, and they still have semi-finals, finals. And it really doesn't matter to us here who comes where in the league table, as long as you get to the finals. And for me, the trophies, that's all that matters.
I think the funny one with India here as well is there's such a huge Premier League following. And oddly enough, Nat, I mean, I think there's this cult following around Tottenham, which is
Yeah.
so strange for a country like India, which generally people associate with a Man United or a City or Liverpool, who's got this huge following here. But I will say we've had a mixed reaction as well, because I think every coach ultimately is going to be judged on the Premier League. And when the results unfortunately aren't being delivered there, yes, a trophy after 17 years reads really well, but somehow it's had on one side from the pure Tottenham purists going, you know what, maybe we could have actually given him a longer run. But there's this deep, darker side which says, you know what, we're too good a side to be fledgling at the bottom half of the table. And sorry, your time's out. So yeah, it's a hard one, the Premier League. It's a really, really hard one to
I
crack.
mean, obviously,
Yeah.
in his defense, what we will say, he did have a lot of injuries. We know
Yeah.
that, but they still have a fairly decent squad that they should have done better in the Premier League. And this is a form as well that we should say came from the season before. He got off to a fantastic start, didn't he? They were top of the table. I think he won the first 3 Manager of the Month awards. But after that, Spurs did start to slide down the table. Now, not as bad as this year, but look, at the end of the day, I'm more on the side of, look, give him a chance because he's just won a trophy. But ultimately, it comes down to what happens in the Premier League, and it just wasn't good enough.
Well, all I can say is I'm glad none of us are managers, because that job seems to be a very difficult one, and under a lot of pressure are those managers. Right, let's move on to the British and Irish Lions tour of Australia, which is heading my way in Australia very shortly. The squad, led by head coach Andy Farrell, will play 10 matches, one in Dublin this coming Friday, before another 9 across Australia. And those 9 matches are made up of 6 pre-tests against various Australian sides, including the New South Wales Waratahs and the Queensland Reds, and then 3 tests against the Australian national side.
Yeah, the squad was announced in early May for the Lions, with Maro Toji captaining the team. And there have been some replacements already, unfortunately, to this 38-man squad, with the likes of Xander Ferguson being ruled out through injury and being replaced by Finley Bealham, I should say. Just for context, the Lions are looking for their first tour victory since Warren Gatland led them on a victorious trip the last time they visited Australia, which was back in 2013. And as for, well, the Wallabies, they are looking to continue their recovery after a dismal World Cup in 2023. And they've got a home World Cup to build for in 2027.
So I wanted to find out what it was like to be inside the camp of a home side when a British and Irish Lions tour comes to town. So Ben Alexander, he is a former Wallaby who had an illustrious career with the ACT Brumbies and the Wallabies, and he earned 72 caps for Australia from 2008 to 2014. He also started all 3 tests for the Wallabies when the Lions last visited back in 2013. So I tracked down Ben and I had a chat with him to get his thoughts ahead of this year's tour. How special is it to be part of a tour as a player against the Lions?
Yeah, it's unbelievable for me. Like, as a young kid who was, remember watching the 2001 series? I was on a rugby tour for school, and how Australia fought back. That's really sort of an iconic moment in Australian rugby history, even a bit of Australian sporting history. It was so special, and I never thought in a million years I'd be a part. I never thought I'd even play for the Brumbies, let alone the Wallabies, let alone playing a Lions series. So it was a real pinch me moment, and only something. So 12 years later, I'm really sort of wow, got to play in this series, got to play in a series, and even though it didn't pan out perfectly, geez, it was just such an unbelievable experience to be a part of, especially as a hosting nation that only happens here once every 12 years. It was just so special, so unique.
You were in the thick of it during the 2013 tour. I was going to ask what your strongest memories were from that series, both on and off the field, and how it shaped your career afterwards.
Yeah, it was really mixed emotions, like overwhelming pride now looking back, but certainly at the time, mixed emotions. Like I got to play my 50th test in the second test in Melbourne, which we won on the bell, and just the pride and excitement of that. And remember getting presented my 50th test cap in the change room after we won and forced a decider, and then just going, wow, we got to do this all again. Like, there was so much pressure and build up to that second test because we just lost the first test. We'd missed a kick to win that. And then, leading into that final, so I'm a Sydney boy, where the 2001 final series decider was played, where the Wallabies had fought back from 1-0 down to win the series 2-1, and here's 12 years later, we lost the first match, won the second. We're in Sydney, my home city, had all my friends, family were at the game, and rugby was really, for a night, it was the front of the Australian sporting psyche, which was awesome. And remember running out, just this huge sense of pride that the whole nation was watching.
Turning our attention to the situation in rugby in Australia, which, as you say, is the best game. It's one of the best, and certainly I'm right up there with you. I love it. A lot of people have declined in their interest with rugby, and obviously the financial situation with Rugby Australia has not been good for a number of years. We've had a dismal World Cup campaign just 2 years ago. What kind of boost is this Lions tour going to bring to modern Australian rugby? And is this our golden chance to reset the game in Australia? If we win, how's it going to go? But if we lose, what's going to occur?
Yeah, so financially, yes, this and hosting the World Cup is going to give the game massive cash injection. We have been in this position sort of 24 years ago after hosting the last Lions series in 01 and hosting the 2003 World Cup, where Rugby Australia was flush with cash. But through no fault of one person, just poor decisions over a long period of time, and very easy to cast judgment looking back. But here we are today, the state the game is in. Rugby, the Australian sporting landscape is just so competitive. Australians love AFL. It's it's the Australian game. There's a lot of people that love rugby league, and rugby just is such a great game of rugby is the best to watch. But I guess if it's wet or the referee's not having a great day, rugby can not be as good a spectacle as it certainly can be. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's inconsistent compared to, say, league and AFL, whereas an average game of AFL is okay to watch. Well, it's very consistent. I guess what I'm trying to say is rugby can be either amazing to watch or not so great. Yeah, if the game teams are just kicking the ball away and it's wet. So what? This series really we do need to. Australia needs to play a great brand of footy and win the series. I mean, if we don't, as long as we go down swinging, I think the fans will be really proud. And that was what left a bit of taste after the last series, was we didn't give a great account of ourselves in that final match. We just did crumble a bit under the pressure and the build up, and some of that's our fault. A lot of it, it's all our fault, but. Yeah, we really need to. The Wallabies do need to go out and put on performances that make Australians proud. Whether we win or lose, we do need to. Fans do need to feel proud. Rugby's got to do its bit to draw that out of people, to make them feel proud to be a Wallabies fan again. And this series is just such a great opportunity for us to build momentum and build excitement leading into the 2027 home World Cup. We definitely won't be favourites going into that World Cup, but if we can put on a really good performance against the best of Europe. That'll give us, a lot of momentum and confidence that the fans will feel like the Wallabies could go deep in that 2027 World Cup. So it is, it's a last massive chance. It's a once in 20-year chance. So it's huge. It is huge for the game here, huge.
You're a front rower yourself. So I think a lot of these series, especially against the Brits, against the Lions, come down to the props and the hookers and the scrum, right? And obviously that 2013 situation, there were a lot of scrum infringements. I think that's what you were sent off for, if my memory serves right. And so how much does that determine this series, do you think? We've always had a strong back three. Are we going to be good in the scrum up front, or are we still relying on our backs and Tom Wrights and the like?
No, I think we've got a great scrum. We've got some much bigger boys. I mean, if we get Will Skelton, I don't know if Will's going to get picked, but him and Taniela Tupa, Alan Alatoa, Angus Bell, you got some of the biggest forwards in world rugby. So I don't think the scrum's not going to be an issue. I remember reflecting back, like, the Lions the scrum was massively important, and that's what makes rugby great, but they did slow the game down a lot. I do remember the games not being very, very fast. A lot of guys going down because we wanted to play an up-tempo, fast game. So it's going to be huge. How the game is refereed. Will referees tolerate players slowing the game down to suit sort of the bigger boys, or are they going to reward up-tempo footy yeah, it's huge because it is it's a clash of styles of game, and yeah, how it be refereed is going to play a huge part in yeah, in who wins. So hope for the fans, the refs don't tolerate yeah teams slowing the game down so players can catch their breath.
And as a reminder, as ever, you can watch my full chat with Ben over on this Sporting Planet YouTube channel.
So I'm going to come to you first of all, Kate, and tell me what shape are Australia in right now?
Oh goodness, Natalie, I am excited with a lot of trepidation, and I think that's the mood across Australia. You know, the Lions tour is such a momentous thing. It was last here in 2013. Most of us, you know, I was just out of high school when they last toured. So that's how big it is. And every time they come around, even the players that are not in that Wallabies setup, the players that get to play in those pre-tests, it's a really prestigious thing. If you're in the Waratahs squad at the time that the Lions come around every 12 years and you get a chance to play against the British and Irish Lions, that is something that goes on your rugby resume forever and you are immortalised. So there's huge excitement around it. Obviously, the tickets are already sold out. I looked online today. The cheapest you can get is about $500, and they're all premium sort of level tickets. They sold out very early on. Very exciting. But in terms of the results, well, we are used to seeing our Wallabies lose. So I feel like we're prepared for, a bit of a whitewash, probably a whole whitewash. But certainly it still hurts when it does come to fruition, even when you are prepared. But that is how I felt since Johnny Wilkinson came in and started kicking goals against us. And I've had that feeling for most of my adult life now. So I do worry. Our team, it's untested, and we know that they came through. You mentioned it, Suhail, as well. They came through a dismal campaign in the World Cup 2 years ago. We've had coaching nightmares. Rugby Australia itself, for you guys, is under total financial chaos. They posted a massive deficit most recently. They are hoping that the ticket sales from this tour are really going to be a massive windfall and bring them back up into the black. But at the moment, rugby's financially in the red. Our coaches are all over the place. We've got an interim coach who's going to be here till October, and then he's going to leave. So really not much incentive to stay on and sort of win and make it his legacy. And a lot of players that we don't know, they're untested. So really excited and trepidatious.
Love the air of optimism there, Kate. It's just absolutely awesome.
I
I
appreciate
have
it.
to say, is there any optimism though? Is there any sense that the Wallabies are in some form of a recovery at the moment? Because it's been a bumpy few years, but I mean, around the world, we talk about Australia and never end up writing them off. I mean, we say this about every sport, yet, however, when it's turned up at rugby, it seems like there's this air of pessimism in most people's voices, which is so strange to hear when it comes to Aussie rugby.
Yeah, I think it must be really interesting for you guys to hear from around the world because obviously, historically, we had such a strong rugby culture. But living here, especially in the last decade or decade and a half, especially since 2013 when they last toured, there has been a massive shift in the sporting culture. And I'm talking, we have Aussie rules and rugby league really competing for that fandom. And rugby participation levels have dropped off a cliff. Rugby interest, fan interest has dropped off a cliff. When the Wallabies started losing around that Johnny Wilkinson era, I tell you, he put a pin in the bubble that was rugby. And all of a sudden, rugby league and AFL are the big things. AFL is growing faster than any other code. All the fans, all the stats show people watch it on broadcast, people attend the games, people are playing it and at younger and younger ages. And increasingly, where rugby had a stranglehold in schools, particularly private schools, and this is similar, I think, in England, AFL is being played. So where kids previously their dads went to a grammar school and they played rugby, so they play rugby, are now hey, I could play AFL, which has a lot more of a potential. It has a bigger pool of clubs in the AFL setup, and there's potentially way more opportunities to play professionally in Australia. So it is really hard to explain that to people who are coming from the outside and looking at international games and not understanding necessarily how things are day to day and weekend to weekend in our sporting scene. Having said that, I think rugby, we had a dip, and I do think the marketing and the direction of Rugby Australia is much better now. And particularly, I think, helped along by the women's game, which is fascinating. You know, I was ground announcing for the women's Waratahs when they won the Super Rugby Women's just recently. And that game, I tell you what, Suhail, this is how rugby needs to be played and should have been played and was potentially played in heaven when they dreamed it up. It is fast, it is less defensive because the bodies are not as big. They are breaking lines, they are kicking less, they don't kick as far, which means kicking's not really an advantage. And all of a sudden, I'm watching rugby that I used to love, which was lots of running the ball, lots of throwing it around, really fast moving. So I really hope that that's the way we can continue to go with rugby, and the fandom will keep going. And as the women's game gets bigger, hopefully that spurs on the men's game as well.
It's interesting to hear because obviously Australians normally are quite confident when it comes to sport. We've spoken about the cricket and we've spoken
Me?
about many.
Confident?
Well, yeah, I mean it's a strange thing. I don't know where it comes from, but you know you've earned it. In fairness, you've earned it. What I will say about this Lions squad, which is Andy Farrell, who is normally the Ireland head coach, he's in charge of this one. He took a step away from the Six Nations most recently. Of his 38-man squad, 26 are first-time tourists, if you like. So
Wow.
there's that dynamic that you've got to think about. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be an easy. You've already mentioned you think it could be a whitewash. I don't think it'll be a whitewash necessarily because I think that's a huge blend that he's got to mix to kind of. Not only is it 26 newbies, if you like, but there's all the different nations that normally, as we always talk about, it's really unique with the Lions because it shouldn't work in principle because you're bringing together Ireland, Scotland, England and Wales. Normally they're fighting against each other, and yet for a very short period of time, they've got to all be best friends and share each other's secrets. And that's not an easy thing to come together and make it work seamlessly. I always find it fascinating when it does work. But also for Andy Farrell, it's his first chance to be the Lions head coach. So again, he's got to learn on the job. It's going to be fascinating, and that's the beauty of all these sort of pre-matches ahead of the Test series that he'll hopefully get to work out what his best 15 is, for example. But I don't think it's going to be as easy as you're making out. I think you're lulling us in there, Kate. That's what you're doing.
It's the only way I can do it, Natalie. Suhail, I wanted to chat with you actually about this while we're on rugby. How is rugby viewed in your part of the world? It's obviously massive for me and Nat, but is it a big deal over there?
That's a great question, and I actually love the timing of that question, Kate, because we've just literally yesterday started the Rugby Premier League in India. So we've got players from across the globe, from Argentina, South Africa, the UK, Australia, Fijians, who've all turned up to play across 6 different franchises representing 6 different cities in India. It's happening in Mumbai at the moment, and it's going to go on for the next few weeks. And you've got sevens back in India. And I think it's a great way to introduce rugby to a country that loves sport but isn't really exposed enough to rugby. So I actually had the opportunity to do the entire social media pre-season for one of the teams, the Chennai side. And we actually came up with a concept saying there's a new 7 in town. And the old 7 is MS Dhoni, and everyone loves MS Dhoni in India. He's a cult icon of the cricketing world. And as the IPL finished, in comes the RPL. And we said, you know what? 1 7 goes away, there's a new 7 in town. And suddenly now there's this fervor around Rugby 7. So I think it's different in the sense that Union isn't really big. Rugby League isn't quite big enough yet. However, there is actually history to Indians playing rugby. There's teams from India that have traveled to Fiji, that have traveled to Australia, traveled to the UK in the past. One of the Indian Bollywood stars, Rahul Bose, was actually a rugby player, and he's now sort of fronted the entire Rugby Premier League. So it's now coming alive. There's a lot of Bollywood backing to it. There's a lot of big business magnates that have come in backing it as well. I'd like to see it succeed. I don't know commercially how successful it'll be in seasons 1, 2, and 3, maybe. But I just hope that people that have invested stay the course, because it's one of those sports where once you get a feel for it, I mean, you know it. I don't need to say it. You're not turning back.
I mean, it's fascinating to see that this is the journey that rugby's going to be going through in
Yeah.
India. And from what you were saying with the social media campaign that you were sort of helping out with, did you see a growth in the interest in that as well?
Yeah, massively. So we kind of took rugby to the people rather than expecting people to come to where the rugby was happening. So we took it to one of the most popular beaches in Chennai. We took it to a mall. We did activations in different places like that, and
Yeah.
said, you know what? Let's make people sample rugby. We threw rugby balls through auto rickshaws and tried to get people to challenge themselves through that's a tuk-tuk basically. So they were tossing rugby balls through a tuk-tuk to try and get it through the other side. We did really random stuff like that. Took it to local fishermen communities, got people who are on ground just to sample a new sport for the first time. And I think if you create an entry point for someone, that's that first touch point. And until you give them that actual touch point, watching a sport is never going to be as big a hook as when you've actually played it. So I think that's the first step towards kind of getting more adoption towards a new sport. I think that's kind of where we are. I can't say it's going to grow leaps and bounds, but I do think the exposure starts there. And in a city like Mumbai, when you've got it there, there's so much more that could happen around it as well.
And wasn't that the best rugby you ever played on a beach, 2-on-2, touch with a 20 by 20 box yard and just touch rugby?
Yeah,
It was the
yeah.
best.
Yeah, I actually got a kit of touch rugby sent across from the UK just for this as well, just so
Yeah.
everyone can get a bit
Oh,
of
nice.
a slice of touch. Because I think all of us that have been exposed to rugby earlier had at least played touch, and to explain that to people in India was still, a bit hard. And I think that kind of brings me nicely into where we're heading now, which is, I guess, like I said at the top, some people call this delusional, some call it flawed, but this could potentially be the future of rugby. And I say that with a hint of fear when Kate's around as well, because Kate, I want to see what the purist in you says. When we speak of R360, it's been backed by a former England player in Mike Tyndall. He's hoping to change the face of rugby. We've seen Live Golf and what it's done for the world of golf. There was so much against it initially. We've seen now the biggest names in the sport go to Live. I love it. I can't say I loved it initially, but who can ignore the biggest names in the sport? When you bring them together, they get a bigger payday. Timings of schedules are going to be interesting because it seems like there could be a direct collision course, Nat, with the Premiership rugby in England. So, big question, and first question to both of you: do you guys think it could work? Are you both excited by it?
I love it. And I think it's funny that you think that I'd be the purist because the Aussies, aren't we the convicts? Aren't we the ones that were sort of rebelling from the start? It was the Brits that are always haughty-taughty
I was just throwing
with
the bait out there.
rugby. Yeah, thank you. Well, you reeled me in. But I got to say, rugby is the one sport that has failed to innovate over the years. And we've
Yeah.
seen it become more defensive. We've seen it become big body on big body. It's slowed down. There's a lot of kicking. It's become just this kicking aerial ping pong that is not the game as it's supposed to be played. And it's not the fun game that you're talking about when you are playing touch rugby on the beach, just in its purest form. We need to get back to the running form of the game. We need to change some rules. There need to be a few tweaks to make it more free flowing because every time it breaks down the scrum and we have to reset, it takes 10 minutes every time. The mauls and the rucks are kind of all over the shop. One pass off the ruck and we go down again. There needs to be something different. Now, rugby league has been really good in Australia at changing rules. We've got this 6 again rule where it continues the play and you get 6 tackles more immediately with a siren. There's all kinds of new additions being made to Aussie rules as well to keep the game moving. Now, rugby union, it is the same as it ever was and as it was invented back in the day in England in some, private school boys' boys situation. So I think it's fair to say rugby is lagging behind the rest of the world and the rest of the other codes. The other thing is we know that fans are moving from rugby to other codes. We know in Australia, particularly AFL and NRL are growing while rugby is getting less exciting and losing fans. So it's fair to say here at least that rugby clubs are being propped up by our international game, the Wallabies, and is the international game that is drawing attention. If you could have an international club game that was more innovative, more fast-paced, and brought in the attention of the younger generation that are currently torn between so many sports, I think it would be fantastic, and it's exactly what I've asked for a long time. The other point I'd make is if you can make stars of the women's game, and I said this before, the women's game is growing so quickly and proportionately it has so much growth ahead of it in terms of the opportunity. I think if you can make stars of people like Ilona Maher, the American, who is a superstar since the Rugby Sevens in the Olympics, if you can make those women start to engage with this new code, I think you've hit the jackpot.
Nat, are you on the same page?
Well, I mean, Kate, you should work for R360. It sounds brilliant what you're saying. I'm on board. I'm absolutely on board. I mean, listen, I am always one that's more of a traditionalist than anything. So I'm never one that likes change too much. But I totally get what you're saying there, Kate. Rugby as a sport is in a bad place right now. You've already mentioned Rugby Australia, the losses that they've posted. The Welsh Rugby Union have spoken about reducing their funding. In England, we've seen recently, 3 Premiership clubs folding, for example, and 7, I think, of the current clubs that are losing money regularly. So there is a massive, massive problem for rugby as a sport in general. Also, the fact that I think, what is it, only in New Zealand? Again, something you picked up on earlier, Kate. Maybe it's the only nation where rugby union is their first sport, their standout sport. So you're already playing second fiddle so many countries across the world to something like football, for example, or soccer, as Todd Harris would tell us. So, yeah, in that sense, they have to think about, well, what can we do to, as you rightly point out, Kate, bring in those younger fans, the younger generation that are going to ensure rugby has a future. The only issue, I think, and where you compare it to Live Golf, is that, and I know Live Golf have teams, but they were, first of all, superstars on their own, these players. And I'm not sure rugby, even though you've pointed out some people that play rugby, like Ilona Maher, like you were saying, but some stars of the future. I just don't know if we have the big enough names yet in rugby.
But that's a marketing
everyone
problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what R360 could bring. But I don't know if we're there yet to start to kick off a completely new league.
So the thing is now with any sport, right, guys, that they're not just sports anymore. They are TV shows, and TV shows that have seasons, they have episodes and characters that build the interest around it. You've got to have characters, so you've got to market it well, and you've got to have the big stars. And what the big stars need, money. That's the other thing. It's going to be huge. They're going to be paid millions and millions of dollars to play less, but to be paid more. And I think that's a massive carry. The rugby as well, it's very hard on the body. Over a career, you can really do yourself some damage. If you're being paid more to play less, I think that's probably almost enough. And then in terms of creating the TV show, marketing around those big stars, it should be easy.
I'm with you on this, Kate. And I think, we've actually termed it sportainment. In India, it's sport and entertainment. And I think you've got to go there because at the end of the day, I look at the IPL and the IPL is a great example of this succeeding. You had test match cricket and I was a purist like you, Nat, and I loved test cricket. I thought it was the perfect, test of your skill, your mental capabilities and your physical capabilities. You now have not only T20 cricket, you've got T10 cricket as well, but the money's there, right? And you've got players as good as Nicholas Puran, Heinrich Klaassen, so many others recently, retiring from national duty to play franchise-only cricket. And I see that happening across other sports as well. Now, here's the pro to it, right? A, you've got women's rugby coming up with 4 franchises there. I think that only enhances women's rugby. B, franchise leagues bring fan engagement from across the world. I'm hearing that these events will become marquee events. Now, think of a Super Bowl every few weeks in a different part of the world. And if that's how this event is being looked at, then I think that's one way to appeal to a new audience. You might have an American franchise owner come in. You might have a franchise owner from India turning up. You know, you might have someone from Europe, you might have someone from Argentina, you might have someone from Australia. Now, suddenly you've got this global appeal with a lot of intrigue, a lot of money, and with a lot of money, of course, comes a lot more marketing. And I think that's kind of the answer. You know, you've got paydays up to 2 million plus, I'm hearing, per year, with shortened duration. And I think it's a staggered league format from what we hear. So players don't put their bodies on the line as much. Their careers elongate. So it's a win-win for the players. They're getting paid more to play less and be hurt less. And I think for a player, therefore, you can't question why they wouldn't want to do it. And I see that with the IPL. I see it with other franchises as well. I saw it with UTT. They're suddenly getting paid as table tennis players to travel the world, play in a franchise, meet new people, get advertised as absolute heroes of the sport, which is what you said. We don't know. I don't know, sitting here in India, more than 5 or 6 brand value rugby players, whereas a league like this might project that into a new nation. So yeah, look, as much as I'm a purist of sport, I do think that it needs a shake-up. And I think this is sort of one way that you enhance global appeal, but you're able to kind of make it a nation-centric sort of pizzazz, razzmatazz version of rugby. I can't quite see a downside just yet, except I do think that international rugby will certainly suffer as a result.
Well, like you say, it's bringing new eyes on the sport, possibly. It's also leading to a debate like this, that we know that rugby is not in a good place. It needs to change. The people that want to get involved in R360 are those that have been involved in the NFL, the Premier League, the F1, for example.
Good.
They've made a success of all of those sports, as we all know. So they've got the right people backing it. It's just, you know, it's ironing out those details, isn't it? And making sure that it actually doesn't disrupt international rugby, doesn't disrupt the domestic game that we all love, but hopefully improves it at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've disrupted enough of people's time with a lot of rugby chat here, guys. So that's it for this episode. Make sure you guys subscribe to the show via your favorite podcast providers so you never miss an episode yourselves. And if you do subscribe, you'll be the first to hear about a special bonus episode where I've been in conversation now with former England cricket captain Sir Andrew Strauss. We're chatting about India's Test series versus England. We'll chat about baseball. We'll even chat a little bit about the world of paddle.
Plus, if you are watching this on YouTube, get involved in the discussion in the comments, and we'd love to hear what you thought of everything we discussed in this podcast. Do you think R360 League will work? What are your predictions for British and Irish Lions tour? Who's your favourite host? Tell us in the comments.
We're not going to start this rivalry between all of us, Kate. Come on. We're also on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. Check us out for all of our daily sports updates. And we're going to be back on Wednesday, the 25th of June, with our preview of this year's Wimbledon Championships. What's next for that blockbuster rivalry between Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner? Plus, who will emerge victorious in a crowded and talented women's field? Until then, from myself, Suhail, Kate, and the whole This Sporting Planet team, thanks very much for tuning in.